Welcome to Interior Analysis. I'm Evan Wessman, and today we're talking about Tell Me Lies Season 1. And I'm joined by my sister, Malia Wessman.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a unique, or at least anomalous episode. This is the first time in like 4 years that Jelani hasn't been on an episode, I think, and no Angel either. Although he did tell me he's watched some of this show, actually. You texted me a few weeks ago and said, I'm obsessed with this Hulu show, Tell Me Lies. I had never heard of it. I knew nothing about it going in. And you were like, I want to come on the show. I'm obsessed with this.
Yes.
So start off with that. Just why are you obsessed with this?
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about who I am, my perspective. This is my first podcast debut, so I'm a little nervous, and I might mess some things up.
Things sound much better in post. Don't worry too much about it.
Okay. Basically, yes, I'm Evan's little sister, and I am very influenced by social media and trends, and everyone in my office was watching Tell Me Lies, so I watched Tell Me Lies, and I am obsessed with it because I'll tell my main highlight reason why I love it so much is because I feel personally as though I can pull a lot of similarities from like situations that I have been in, or like just like different friend dynamics that I feel like are pretty relatable, and especially with like situationship culture a lot. I feel like that is very common theme with my friends, and especially like people my age. I'm 23, but 23, and
okay,
because it's too old. I want to be 22. 21.
All right, well, screw you. I'm 25.
I think 21 is a cute age. 23 is not. But yeah, I feel like I have seen a lot of these, not like as messed up as this show, but like there's a lot of like different parallels and just different situations that I'm like, oh, I could see myself like getting wrapped up into a situation like that. You know what I mean?
I'll say that, like, just I tend to be involved in much less drama than I think you tend to, and that is intentional.
Yeah.
But I will say from what minimal drama there is in my life, I was like, it was slightly cathartic.
Okay.
So that surprised me because I don't tend to gravitate towards stuff like this. Like,
I know, I was honestly shocked that you were like, yeah, I'm down to watch it. I was like, oh.
I was down to watch it because I was just like, if you're into this, there must be something somewhat superlative about it.
Yeah.
You don't get turned up, or like you don't nerd out about stuff the way I do. And I can like, I tell this to most people. Like, there's a very, very short list of things that I will not cover on this show because I can get interested in just about anything.
Right. Next, we'll do the Kardashians.
All right. Well, let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. But I don't know how much I could actually say about that.
No, because it's all fluff and it's just. Hours of ads now.
There's stuff to talk about reality. I don't think that's my place.
We won't.
Let's finish up with yours because I'll get into my reactions after. But
well, that was just my umbrella. Like, this is how I feel about the show. Like, I like it because it's so twisted and messed up, and there's always like, it keeps you on the edge of your seat. And I love when things are shot. You probably know the technical term of this, but when they're shot like present day and then past, and then it like flips back and forth.
Non-linearly.
Non-linearly.
Yeah.
I just think that's so interesting.
You had warned me prior to me watching any of these. You were like, this might be a little rough for you.
Yeah.
Like, it might not, in that it might not be like my thing. And
right. I don't think you would have voluntarily watched this, like, if it came up on your feed.
No, I'd never even heard of it. Actually, before I get into that, just a few warnings to cover the outset. Spoiler warning for season 1 only. I have not watched season 2. We will be covering it. You have.
Yes.
Leah has. But I am going to this only knowing season 1. I have looked at nothing for season 2. Also, possible language and content warning.
Yeah.
If you are, I'm just going to say this because I figure more of them will listen to this than others. If you are in our family, just warning for this. This show goes a little bit outside polite conversation. I assume most of you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So just like fair warning for that. We might be getting into some stuff. For my reactions. First couple episodes were quite bumpy for me.
You thought?
Yeah, the first 2, I was like, I don't know, man. I had a really hard time. I'll get into it, but I still haven't really locked into Lucy as a character. And that was like added to worst in the first 2 episodes. I found out, so this is based on a book, And
Yeah.
I kind of suspected that in the first episode, and then I looked at the opening credits in the second, and it says like based on a book. I was like, okay, you can tell.
You can tell in a bad way?
Kind of. I'll maybe save that for when we get into the topics. But like
Okay.
the first two were bumpy, but then like episode 3 and 4, it kind of hits its stride, and like we get into more of the minor characters, and that helped me kind
Yeah.
of lock into it. This is not a favorite for me, but like I'm not dreading season 2.
Okay. You're
and
not so pumped for season 2.
I'm not so pumped for season 2. I think that would have been a tall order. I'm fine to continue with this.
Okay. I agree that Steven and Lucy, honestly, are my least favorite characters. Like, I think that the
Well, I think
supporting
that's by
characters...
design.
No, yeah, because they're both so messed up. But I'm really going to try not to swear. I'm really gonna try.
It's okay if you do in terms of the podcast. If you don't want to hear people upstairs to hear you, that's a different story.
No.
We're at our parents' house, by the way.
Strict no swearing in this
Okay.
episode. No, I think that Steven and Lucy are the worst characters, and I think all the supporting characters are so much better, and the deeper that they dive into their stories, the better the story becomes.
The minor characters, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. I've kind of felt that so far as well.
Okay, yeah, I feel like that's a theme that goes throughout.
I guess I'll start with my like latest one chronologically.
Sure.
Who is Lydia? So at the
Okay,
end of the show,
yes.
Steven introduces his, and this is in like the 2015 part of the timeline. He introduces Lydia, his fiance, and I was like, okay, she came up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember who she is. Try not to get into season 2 spoilers. If you can't, like,
Yes, and no, it's just
she
very,
does come up though, right?
Yes.
I was like,
So she's in the
been
very
here.
first episode. I think it's the first scene. She is Lucy's hometown best friend.
Oh, okay.
And she was literally like,
I
I'll call you
remember who she is
from
now.
campus, like whatever. Yes.
I just didn't remember that name with that character.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That means there's wow. Okay, so much is probably going to keep happening.
Wild.
On a plus side, I appreciate that the show is pretty efficient. There's not like extraneous scenes or plot lines. We haven't covered a lot of TV shows on this, but the one that we've stuck with the most is The Boys.
Boys,
and
yeah.
holy crap, does that show have way too much time. I think I've said about every single season that we've covered of that, they're all 8 episodes. They should be 6.
Yeah.
They have like 2 extra hours that they don't need. I did not feel that at all with this show.
Honestly, the only time, and I talked about this with my friends, but the only time where I feel like it's downtime is I feel like there's like 1 or 2 sex scenes per episode. And I feel like that is the downtime.
Well, I actually disagree with that. So that was another note I wanted to make at the outset. This, I think, is a big win for, like, purposeful sex scenes.
Yeah,
I started clocking it
agree.
maybe 3-ish episodes in. I was like... So it at first it feels a little bit gratuitous because there's just a lot of them.
Right.
But after a little bit, I started clocking, like, okay, there's actually a pretty, like, vital character beat that happens in all but maybe, like, 2 of them.
Yeah,
And-
I do think it's like a lot of character development. And also, like, sorry, it's college. Like, everyone's
Yeah.
so like,
and I also thought it was a win for like just showing safe sex practices. I feel like I haven't actually seen that very much in most shows. Like, good on them for that. It's a small thing, but I feel like just more things should do it.
And I also appreciated that it wasn't like so overdone. Like, I feel like in movies sometimes there'll be like one sex scene and it's like very like elaborate and like just like very over the top and overdone. And this I feel like is a lot more casual, but not casual in like a bad like kind of like demeaning way. It's more casual, just like
it's not
this is-
gratuitous.
Right. Casual, like this is part of life. This is like,
Yeah.
but it's not like obscene.
Well, I think what sells it for me is like in the language of the show, they can just have sex scenes be implied in some cases when nothing important happens. Whenever they
Right.
show it, there is something, or like in all but maybe 1 or 2 cases, there is something important
Yeah.
happening. It's not just there
Yeah.
to be essentially like softcore.
I agree.
Which a number of shows, like especially streaming shows, like early Game of Thrones, I think falls into that trap, and a lot of HBO stuff, like pre-Netflix, I think kind of feels like it, because it was like kind of the only game in town for like adult TV. I feel like they go harder than they need to on some of like the violence and sex stuff because they're the only ones that can do it. But then like post Netflix, they were like, all right, let's only do it when we need to.
Yeah.
And this feels like a it feels like it exists in like a post that
Yeah.
world where it's not doing it just because it can. It's like there's a purpose here.
I agree.
My final note, I just thought this was hilarious. One of the final scenes of this season is Diana and Steven walking down the stairs as Mr. Brightside swells. I thought that cracked me up.
Iconic.
It cracked me up so much. I don't know why. I love that song, but it's just like something about it just was kind of ridiculous, but I loved it.
That scene is just so crazy because, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've seen this more recently than I have. I mean, I just watched it last month, but Evan's watched it more recently than me.
Yeah, I think I finished it like a week ago.
And if I'm not incorrect, Lucy and Steven walk into that party together.
Yeah.
And they leave, and Steven leaves holding Diana's hand.
Yeah.
Fucking wild. Like,
yes.
That is just like the biggest, like, F you, like, just insane to me. And like, what Lucy did in response, not okay. For those of you who have not watched the show, she sleeps with Steven's best friend, who has a crush on her, and Lucy knows that has had a crush on her for
Which I don't
forever.
know if I bought, but we can save that for later.
So like, yes, she took revenge in like a not a great way. However, I would be like so unwell. I probably just would have like cinder blocked his car, but like that was just so like my jaw was on the floor. The floor. I just like was sitting there staring at my TV like like that is just a diabolical move.
I was kind of just laughing at it because like earlier in the episode, maybe like a couple scenes before, like they're all at the party, and I think it's like a few of them like on couches in a room together.
Yes.
Lucy leaves, and then I think Evan leaves, maybe somebody else does in between, and then it's just Diana and Steven. I was like, it would just be hilarious if they started making out right now and Lucy walks in. I would crack up so hard. And then we
basically did.
Like, we get basically that, but with Mr. Brightside as the soundtrack.
I know, that was
This is kind of fantastic. That was the end of my initials. If you had anything else you wanted to say before we get into the topics, you can go ahead now.
No, I just have my topics.
All right, so intro your topic then.
So I don't have like one set. I wanted to go through all the characters, the 8 main characters, and just kind of talk about like originally I said they were defining moments, but now I'm just kind of scatterbrained and excited and like want to talk about all my feelings, thoughts, and emotions.
Okay.
So I just like hate Steven and Lucy, so I don't want to start with them. Okay, I'll start with Pippa actually, because we haven't talked about her yet.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Pippa is one of Lucy's friends.
Yes.
And basically it comes out, and she's also dating one of Steven's friends. I just want to give background for people who don't seen the show. Okay, so Pippa is dating Wrigley at the time. Wrigley is like, I don't think he's the quarterback. He's just he's a quarterback?
I thought he was. I mean, we never actually see him play football, which in hindsight feels really weird.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that. He is on the football team. He's like a big wig on campus. And it comes out that she basically didn't have like any friends in high school and like her previous life before college. And her dad comes to visit her on campus and basically her dad is Spanish speaking and says to her in Spanish, so like Wrigley doesn't hear when they're like out on this date, like basically like, I hope you're like making good choices and like you have good friends and not like your old quote unquote friends that like didn't care for you.
Which at that moment we didn't know yet. That was like the first hint of that we had.
But it just makes me so sad for her that like she got screwed over by like friends in her past, and like now she's trying to build up this image that she like had such like a wild crazy high school life, and like she's this like free spirit who's like experienced like everything, and like the girls basically are like getting ready for a party and she's like talking about all her like experience with sex and drugs and alcohol and like all that kind of stuff, and the other two girls like Lucy and Brie are kind of just like, oh whoa, like I have never done that. Like they're like kind of in awe of her experience, and it's kind of all fake, and that just like makes me so sad for her because I feel like a lot of people like feel like they need to fake like whatever their likes, dislikes, like experiences, whatever, to like get friends. And I just feel like that's like such a topic that we see like in American media, and it just makes me so sad for the world because I truly believe that like when you are the truest form of yourself is when you are the brightest, and like you will find the people that like see that light in you.
I have a question about her with that. Not to invalidate anything that you said there.
I just feel like that I just ended on such a high, and you're just like, question.
Sorry, I go at things a little bit more scientifically than that. This might be a little bit of an anomalous episode. That's fine.
No, I want to talk about my thoughts, feelings, and emotions as I said in the beginning.
Okay. So I liked that initially when we heard it from her, because I feel like that episode, I got, like, I didn't really care about her one way or the other before that. I forget which, I think it's maybe 7?
With
maybe
her dad.
6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah.
The one where we get basically all of her backstory.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, there's like one that pretty much focuses her. I liked that initially, and then in hindsight I was kind of like, does she play the part a little too well? This is the writer in me. I apologize. It'll be coming out for most of this because that's what I normally do here. But is it not telegraphed enough? Like, I feel like it doesn't recontextualize anything. The only evidence we have that she had a more, like, socially isolated past came up only in that episode. It almost felt like a retcon. Slightly. I don't think it was bad enough, but I was thinking before then, like, she's almost a little too natural in the role of, like, I feel like of the girls in the show, she's kind of the de facto leader of, like, that friend group. She's kind of like the loudest voice.
Yeah.
And
I see that.
She fits into it so naturally that, like, I think it does fool us as the audience into thinking that she is who she claims to be. But then with that reveal, I was like, if she was like that awkward, then I feel like we should have seen maybe just hints of it, or even you could have done like a flashback to show it a little more from her perspective. We don't get that. And I'll just mention this now for context. So I happen to be near a bookstore for a lot of today with a lot of time on my hands for just random family errand related business reasons. But I decided to stop into the bookstore that I was next to and just take a look at it and see if they had a copy of the book this is based on, because I've been curious about the point of view of it from the start of watching this. Turns out Stephen and Lucy apparently are the only point of view characters. Their names are at the top of every chapter. Game of Thrones books do the same thing, where they don't have titles. They just say whose point of view is this from. Those are the only two. As far as I could tell, I did a very cursory glance at it. Also, apparently the book takes place, it starts in like the beginning of the timeline is 2010, goes to 2017. The show is 2008 to 2015.
Yeah, I don't know why they needed to change that or whatever.
I don't either. That's just an anecdotal thing. What that tells me from the perspective of this show is that a lot of the stuff that is more from the minor character's perspective is something that was probably manufactured a little bit more for this show. I imagine they took some creative liberties.
Too.
I haven't read the book, and I assume you haven't either.
No, I have not.
So maybe they sort of needed to retrofit that a little bit, because maybe that's a completely new thing for Pippa. Maybe there's nothing about that in the book, and that's just something they made up. I kind of feel like it's a little too important to completely be made up, but at this point in the show, Lucy does not know that backstory, so I assume that at this point in the book, she doesn't. Maybe it comes up later in the book, and we just are privileged with that knowledge now.
I do think it's foreshadowing. But also, I think, because my whole topic is pulling this into IRL, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, real life, reality.
I know what IRL means.
I know, but I was just made fun of by Amanda for using too many acronyms. I think that this is more common than we think in real life. Like, people faking it till they make it happens all the time. And like...
Or lying by omission.
Like, she clearly wanted to be something that she wasn't in high school, and I think a lot of people feel this way in college. They go into college, they have a clean slate, they want to be this alter ego that they weren't able to be in high school, and she's using this opportunity as such, and I feel like it's very common, and I don't think that like it needed too much of a backstory.
Yeah, it made me wonder if it was a retcon. It doesn't break the show for me. It doesn't break her character for me. I would not go so far as to call it a plot hole. I just kind of questioned it a little bit because there was no hint of it. Like, sometimes you get a reveal like this with a character, and it sort of recontextualizes what we've seen of them up to that point. And you're like, oh, that moment means this. And I feel like there's none of that.
I totally get that, yeah.
But I agree with you that, like, it's not too far of a stretch to say that, like, she can fake it that well. And from what I think we are shown, like, I'm relatively neutral on her. If we're talking about like the three pairings of couples in this show, Lucy and Steven, garbage tier.
Yeah.
Wrigley.
You know they're dating in real life too.
I didn't, but okay. And then Wrigley and Pippa, mid. They're fine. And then Bree and Evan, so far up until the very end.
Yeah.
They're
like
the
the
only two
solid
that I
couple.
actually ship. I imagine
Right.
that it seems like they kind of want you to rank them that way. I
Yeah.
don't think that's
I agree.
I don't think that's exactly a hot take that I'm giving there.
One other thing I'm gonna say about Pippa, sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
go
I
ahead.
just everyone else, I feel like their like wardrobes are pretty like realistic. Like Pippa, I'm so distracted by. They make her not cute. Like her outfit's terrible. Her hair, like her style is just like they just make her so distractingly not as like put together as all the other characters, and I don't like that. I think they're trying to like be like she's a mess, like trying to like paint that picture more, and I'm like I just feel like her character, knowing that she's like trying to like rebrand and everything, would not dress the way that she does.
But maybe does she not know how? Maybe does she not
Touche.
have that eye? Granted, I'm coming at this
No.
having my
I mean,
fashion sense or lack
I
thereof.
wish there was a camera, except I'm not camera ready, but Evan is wearing quite an outfit today.
I don't think it's okay. Whatever. I'll take that burn. Nobody can see to confirm, but this is whatever. I don't know how colors work, everyone.
No, but okay. Well, moving on. Do you have
After that sick burn.
basically Lucy finds out about the car accident from Steven, and it comes out that Pippa knows, and Lucy gets mad at Pippa because she didn't tell her. I just like they've both found out from their boyfriends. First of all, the girl who died was Lucy's roommate. But I just feel like they were both standing by their boyfriends in this scenario. And I don't think that Pippa needed to tell Lucy. I understand why Lucy was mad. I feel like it probably should have come up in conversation better. But I think that shows that they're not as close as they think that they are.
I think that's fair.
But I don't think that Lucy had a right to be as pissed as she was at Pippa.
Yeah, I have a really hard time like sympathizing with a lot of what Lucy does in this
I know.
season.
My first thing for her is she's honestly such a bitch and is just as bad as Steven. That is my first no. Lucy.
Do we want to transition into her, or did you want to move into a
No,
different character?
we don't need, we can transition into Lucy unless you want to go into your
Okay,
thoughts.
no, let's do it because I had maybe we'll go into your thoughts first, seeing as it's your topic. But like, I had such a hard time logging into her. Go ahead.
She's hard to sympathize with, I think, because of her actions. Same with Steven. However, Steven is a lot better at manipulating than Lucy is. Okay, some of my friends are like, oh, like I feel bad for Steven, and I'm like, how? He's the biggest asshole. But I see where they can sympathize with him because he plays his like mass manipulator very well. I think he plays it well. Lucy doesn't, and she's just the worst.
They're both the worst. Like, I had that note maybe 4 times in the last few episodes.
Like, just the worst.
They're
like,
both kind of the
terrible.
worst.
So bad.
It telegraphs to us very early, and I was a little surprised at this. Like, I didn't know anything about it going in, but we have the flash forward, and Steven is, like, mentioned. This is like a writing exercise you do early on. Have people talk about a character before they enter a room to kind of, like, build up their reputation. He's built up as, oh man, this guy. Like, oh boy, he's a piece of work.
Yeah.
And the whole first episode is like,
He's not that bad.
No, the whole first episode I was like, seems like we could see garbage from the start.
Right.
Like, why does this even work? Like, for other stories like this, the main point I go to is Gone Girl, because that's about another toxic relationship. I'll try to avoid spoilers for that, but like, we see the early stages of that relationship in flashback, and you're like, okay, I can see where they hit it off. Like, you can understand why it started. For this, I was
agree.
like, we don't get that here. He's kind of terrible from the word go.
Right, I fully agree, Ev, because I needed more to draw me in to be like, okay, like, I see why Lucy fell for him, but there was none of that. They had one
and
date.
the other
they had
direction too.
The
like
what? Sorry.
both ways.
Yes,
like,
no, I know.
Aside from just these being like conventionally attractive people, which
Right.
of course they were going to be because it's a Hollywood production.
Hot take, Steven is not cute.
I'll take your word for it. I was kind of thinking, because the way he's treated in the show, this is coming from a straight dude perspective, but I was like, okay, I guess he's just based hot.
No, no.
Because apparently everyone's falling all over themselves for him.
No.
I can see it a little bit with like Lucy Van Patten as an actor, but even she has no personality.
But okay, again,
but he at least has a personality. It's a terrible personality, but he has a personality.
Right. Lucy morphs to whatever she
seems to at least.
But I will say again, my topic is pulling this into real life. There are so many mid guys or middle ugly, guys.
Would you put him in this category?
I do not find him physically attractive. Okay, there's a lot of guys in this genre that are narcissists, draw girls in, or are basically love bomb them. Do you know what love bombing is?
Yes, I know what that means.
Love bomb them, make the girls fall for them, and then they start doing this manipulative. I'm gonna get what I want out of you, and you're gonna be there when I want you, and not when I don't want you. And this is so common for girls right now, and I just feel like him being looking the way I feel so bad talking negatively about his looks, but it's a topic in the show, and I feel like that's what me and my friends talk about. Why is she falling for this guy? Because he's giving her attention, and she doesn't really have anyone else on her roster except Evan, but she can't really go for Evan because
he's with her friend.
Her friend, and she doesn't want to hurt her friend. They casted him well, I think. They casted him well.
See, okay, that's interesting because
I don't think that he's ugly. I just don't. There's much hotter actors out there that they could have picked.
Okay, I mean everyone's got their thing, but I was kind of looking at this to dive into both of them. Both of these characters. Get into it. The main reason that this show bumped for me in the first couple episodes was when I said at the top that this felt like a book adaptation. The thing that signaled that to me was how hard it was to read Lucy. A thing you can do in books is you can just tell us what the character is thinking.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is really hard to translate into a visual medium. A lot of times the thing that happens with that is you have voiceover to basically just say what's there already in the book. Right. We don't have that here. So some of the things that she does in the first couple episodes, I'm like, either she just canonically has no personality, or this is just a bumpy adaptation. And I typically lean towards, in those situations, I typically take it as I'm going to assume that was a poor adaptation. I like to blame authors for how characters act before I blame characters, especially.
Fair.
This is maybe going to sound slightly sexist, but especially for female characters, because there's just a myriad of examples of writers, both male and female, just writing unlikable women that they are just basically taking out personal frustrations on. We see it on both ends, and I like to try to divorce how I feel about a character from that when I can sense it.
Yeah.
By the end of this show, I really don't sense that here. From what I can tell, it just seems like, and I say this mostly because the other characters are given things that we can sympathize with them. They're given more of a personality. So I guess Lucy just canonically, unless there's a ton that's missing from the book, and this is just a kind of failure of adaptation. Unless that is the case, she just has no personality.
No, she sucks.
And is kind of terrible.
I think that is I don't understand why they would do that to the main character, but I think that that's true.
Unless it's the point somehow, and maybe it is from what I can tell. There's a lot of this. Apparently, I was glancing at the time, the timestamps in the book. Apparently, there's a lot of timeline that we still have to get through. This is only and it's not a thick book. It's maybe 300 pages from what I could see. I thought this was going to be the whole book, and the later seasons were maybe just extra stuff.
Yeah.
But it looks like they take us pretty much up to present, present when the show starts, 2015, 2017 in the book. But if this is our lead character, thank God there's minor characters, because I would just be so out if not.
I don't know why they don't give her a personality, but I think you're right. I think that's the point. And I don't think that it's the book adaptation, like book to movie. I really think that she just doesn't. I mean, I'd be curious to read the book. I would be curious to read the book and see how she's portrayed in the book. But
yeah, and there's just so many. Like, I was trying with her because if you're taking the relationship between her and Steven, like just the stuff we have with that,
yeah,
he is lying to her constantly.
Right.
So
the show is called.
Yes, and
Tell Me Lies.
So I was geared for that beforehand, and
yeah.
like we're presented pretty early. All right, this is a terrible dude. He's gonna be the worst to a lot of people. We see that pretty early. So like, and that was a thing that I just sort of took me aback at first because I was like, okay, they're not trying to trick us at all. They're not even trying to show us that like they're at least not trying to hide from us that he is like this manipulative dude.
Right.
But like, you have to be able to differentiate in your head, like what do we see versus what do different characters see.
Right.
And all of her friends seem to agree, like when first like kind of go on a soft breakup, Bree and Pippa are like, thank God.
Right.
We've been waiting for this forever.
Yeah.
And I feel like at several points Lucy has, I feel like I'm almost victim blaming by saying this, but she seems to have enough evidence to just not want to be around this dude. And
no, but because this is classic manipulator. Once they really love bomb you, then now the girl becomes obsessed with them once they drop it, because they're like, what happened? What am I not doing now that I'm not gaining your attention? So that's why she is like still wants to keep going, because she kind of like, essentially he's dating Diana and Lucy at the same time.
Right.
But
we are privy to that, and she is
not.
And neither of them are. They're both sort of oblivious to each other's presence for most of the
and that's
show.
why they hate each other.
Yes.
So, which makes sense, but they reel them in, and now Lucy is trying to get back with him, and she's like, she doesn't want things to have ended with him. She's like, kind of like, oh, things ended with Steven, but she's like sad about it. It's not going to tell her friends because she knows that it's bad for her, but she is addicted to the chase now. And not as necessarily in love with him, but addicted to what she thinks she will feel once she, like, quote unquote, has him.
Okay. I wasn't taking that reading at all. I was trying, like, the whole season, I was trying to, like, see if I could find some motivation for not even just stuff that she does with Steven, but, like, most of the things she does in this show. The most we're given textually is, like, he excites me, is something she says early on. And I've never been excited about someone. I was like, okay, that can give me some kind of runway.
Because he plays the game harder than she does. That's why.
Okay. I guess I didn't take that. I'm not going to refute your reading of that. I just find
my personal opinion, that's what I think.
It kind of seems like they're leaving a lot open to interpretation with her in a way that they aren't with most other characters. Like, it's really hard.
Depict her very differently than the rest.
Like, okay, the first moment that, like, I had a really hard time, I was like, okay, it seems like they're implying something here. So she goes to, this is, I think, it's second episode, she goes to Diana's fundraiser. I think it's maybe the first time they've seen each other, but she knows they were together. And her and the other two girls are, like, kind of doing a little bit of almost like reconnaissance on her, like, okay, what type of girl is she? Is she terrible? And
right.
The whole interaction is basically, the conclusion is like, she seems nice, and then Lucy like purposefully walks off, goes and hooks up with Steven for the first time. I'm like, okay, what is the causality there? Why does like her seeing that Diana's a nice person confirm to her, all right, I want to be with Steven? That like didn't connect for me. And
because she's meeting her competition.
Too.
She's meeting her competition, and she wants to prove to Steven that she is better than her competition.
Okay, that did not translate
this is,
to
again, all of my perspective, but that is why I think that. But
do you think that this is going to be more of like a writing question? Do you think that is sufficiently implied? Or do you feel like that's a little bit more your head canon? I'm not trying to invalidate it.
I think that's just like a girl fight.
Okay. I did not feel that at all. I did not feel like that was implied at all in the subtext.
I wish there was a female here.
I know. I feel like we're having to speak too much for our genders here.
Wait, but I was going to say something about that meeting. Diana is such an interesting character to me. And she's so interesting because she's so perfect. There's nothing really that Lucy and the other girls find that to like hate her. She seems like a very nice person, like running a charity for whatever she
Right.
is. And it's interesting to me that she picks Steven to date.
Yeah, I kind of like saw them as at least a little more like they're at least ambitious. I can kind of see them as like a power couple in like a Frank and Claire Underwood House of Cards type of way.
Okay.
Like at least a little bit more. I don't really see it either. But at least like when she's talking to Steven in the final episode when they're at the Hawaiian party or whatever.
Yeah.
She's like, "Why the hell are you with Lucy? She has no drive. She has no ambition. Didn't you like yourself better when you were with me?" And I was like,
Again,
yeah, like they kind
yeah.
but in the scenes that we see with the two of them, with Steven and Diana, like they do kind of have power couple vibes. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not like as much of an emotional connection, but they're both ambitious. They're both kind of like helping each other be driven. There's something there.
No, I agree. There is something there, but he doesn't seem to have like everything that Diana would portray that she wants in a boyfriend, because he doesn't show up. He doesn't.
I agree.
Yeah, like yes, I think academically or whatever, career-wise, he seems driven, and he obviously is very intelligent in his classes. Like he seems to.
But also tanks
well.
that one interview. I feel like
Yeah.
for all we hear about his intelligence, we see it a couple times, but he tanks that interview.
Right. But I think that's because he's a narcissist.
Yes. I mean, he's obviously like, I know you've only seen a little bit of Community, but he's trying to do pull a Jeff Winger, essentially.
Okay.
And
That means
that's
nothing
the
to
main.
me, but that's okay.
Okay, watch Community someday. It's really good.
I used to fall asleep to it, and then you got mad at me. For
Yeah, I
that.
know, but I didn't watch Peaky Blinders like you asked me to, so
I
guess...
know you really should. That one is.
All right, make me do an episode on it,
so
because I hear that one's
good.
actually good. Not to diss this show too much, but I hear that's much better.
No, that one's really good.
Anyway, he's trying to pull a Jeff Winger, and like...
Yeah, because he's an. I don't know what Jeff Winger means, but he is.
He's
such a
he's essentially
narcissist.
just like talking out his ass, but he's really
Right.
good at it, or at least he thinks he is.
He thinks he's really
and
good at
sometimes
it.
he can talk a dog off a meat truck, but
Right.
in this case, he just is whiffing.
And he like thinks he's hitting it so hard.
Yes, but I know we're kind of bouncing between a few characters here. Like,
Yeah.
for the two of them, I feel like there's at least scenes where maybe it's not like full chemistry, but there's at least an established dynamic there.
Yeah.
That I feel like is like all that Lucy and Steven do is distrust each other.
Right, and I think that's why he ends up like leaving with Diana that night.
Yeah.
In that infamous scene.
The infamous.
But
the
I
Mr.
just
Brightside.
I know. I wish that they like that's the one thing I wish they did with this show is like in the first 2 episodes they should have like shown Steven courting her a little bit more.
Courting Lucy.
Yeah.
You mean? Okay.
Diana, I feel like they kind of established that, but like Lucy and Steven, we don't see them have like a solid relationship. We only see
Yeah.
them messing with each other.
Pretty much, yeah. Like it's and that was a hard sell for me. And part of me was like, okay, maybe that's the point of the show. Maybe they're kind of doing this commentary on like all these people have in common is that they're just two conventionally attractive people, and that doesn't work when it's just that. Maybe that's the point of this show.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you can, especially in something that's shorter. Like we've talked about it on a few like early 2000s movies on the show where we're just like, okay, that was the era where they just kind of banked on, from a creative standpoint, they would just bank on, we have two conventionally attractive actors here.
Yeah.
They're going to get together by the end. Fine. It's 2003. This is what we do now.
Right.
This is a long form show
Right.
in 2022. So if you are doing, and it's not even doing that because it's proving to us that like this is terrible for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no runway. There's no like dynamic that's established. As far as we can tell, they are just attracted to each other and are stuck like glue for some reason.
Right.
And keep lying to each other to stay in this relationship and like bend over backwards for each other. Like there's just so much, and
I know.
I don't know why.
But again, with my topic, bringing it back to real life, I think in the era of situationships, this unfortunately is much more common than we think. I know of people in my life currently that are in situations, not this fucked up, but like similar.
I'll take your word for it. To validate your confusion, there's very little the show is giving us to go off of.
Right.
Chemistry is a hard thing to sell, and it doesn't
And
seem
it's
like the show wants us... But it doesn't seem like the show is selling us on that. Like,
right.
So,
but they're not trying to.
They're not trying to, and there's some cases where, like, we talked about it in Baby Driver recently, where it's like, that's a couple that they clearly want us to ship, but they don't quite do the work in either the writing or, like, Lily James and Ansel Elgort just don't quite click like that.
And usually I feel like you see this a lot in movies because unfortunately, they don't have enough time to show a full relationship develop.
Yeah, especially if it's a secondary focus.
Right. But with a TV show, that's why I like TV shows so much more than movies, is because you see the character dynamics, like, and their relationships, like, grow and build, like, strong relationships. Mm-hmm. And this, you don't for a reason. I think it's on purpose.
I think it's on purpose as well. I do wonder, though, like, to me, the final scene of this season feels... You have a different perspective on this because you've watched forward more. It felt like it could have just been the end. I'm like, okay, what is going to pull us back in? What is going to pull these characters back into each other's orbits in season 2? It seems like, I mean, at the very least, like, Evan is moving out, like, he's going to live in his own place. I was like, thank God, good for you.
Yeah.
Go away. Go find him and Bree for, like, half the season. I was like, these two need new friends. They are too good for these people.
They do.
And obviously that doesn't happen because we see the flash forward.
Right.
But even for, like, at the end of this season, it's like, Steven is back with Diana, and it's not a plot hole, exactly. But there was a little bit of a thing that I was just kind of keeping in the back of my head for a lot of the show, which is, there are thousands of other people on this campus that these people can be friends with, right, or get into relationships with. And it seems like they're just, okay, we've got people that we are living across the hall from, and these are our friends for life. I was friends with people like that I lived near freshman year. I still talk to some of them.
Right.
But they're not, like, there's just more people out there, and we don't see any of them, like...
some people live their life like this.
It's a little bit of a hard sell, though. Like, I just, like, I understand from a writing perspective, you want to keep your cast limited to just, like, you know, you don't want to have to bring in 18 different people. It's a lot cleaner with 8.
Right.
Fine.
Right.
But, like, there is a little bit of just, like, there's other fish in the sea here, guys. Like,
no, I get that, but also, like, I feel like this is common. Like, when there's large friend groups, like, everyone ends up dating each other. That's, like, such a common thing, I feel like.
Fair enough, but, like, you can also expand. And
no, yeah,
I understand from a budgetary perspective not wanting to bring in more cast, or just even writing this as a book. Like, you want to keep your focus limited.
Right, you can't have a zillion characters.
Yeah, when I'm having a hard time buying the relationship, then, like, again, maybe this is the point of the show, but it is a little bit of, like, it makes me dislike the characters more, because I'm just like, do you not have, like, friends in classes? You can go join a club. There's other people at all these parties you guys are going to. Talk to somebody else.
That's not the point of the show. The point of the show is to be dramatic.
But it is a little bit of, like, this is a weird comparison, but it's almost like when the character makes a dumb decision in a horror movie.
Yeah.
You're like,
what are you doing?
Just walk out the door. Don't go into the creepy house.
Right. No, I know. I get that.
You have an out. And if this is what the story's trying to explore, I don't want to get away from it. It's a little bit of a bump there.
Yeah.
I understand why they're doing it. It's kind of a thing that's just in my head. I'm like, these people need better friends. And there's more people out there.
Yeah. Okay, something else I want to bring up. Lucy writing the letter to faculty.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to scream. I'm giving a context to the listeners who haven't seen it. There's a car accident that involves Macy, who is Lucy's roommate. She ends up dying, and the faculty are trying to piece together how it happened. Basically, the car was coming from a party back on campus, and the girl was killed, and the police are looking for evidence. So Lucy writes a letter saying that Wrigley, one of Steven's best friend's little brother, Drew, was involved in the car accident. But that's all she says. She just says,
like, ask him about it.
Ask Drew about the car accident and how Macy died. And I just think that was one of the worst decisions she could have made.
Agree. Like, I was trying to give her some, like, grace with stuff throughout the whole show, but after that I was like, there's just no reason.
There's no reason
There's
for her to
no
do that.
reason.
Her reason was to, like, try to show loyalty to Steven. But, like, you're not doing that.
He's upset at her after. Like, it's not even a
Right.
thing that he asks her to do, and he's mad at her after. So,
Right.
like, it's...
that's
why it's so hard to get on her side.
I don't understand why she would have done that. Because it just doesn't make any sense to me. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, where's your personality? Where does your loyalty lie? Like, I don't understand. I just don't understand.
Yeah, and, like, I could kind of see it as, like, all right, things are starting to unravel here. We're getting to the end of the season. I was going to save this note for my topic, but a lot of what this show does for, like, narrative momentum is tying a lot of knots with, like, lies that characters tell and, like, information that's hidden, and then untying those knots as information's revealed. Mm-hmm. You want the knot to untie toward the end. And we got a bit of that. It's not fully untied. I thought it was going to fully untie by the end of the season. And doesn't quite.
Season 2.
I guess so. But I didn't know how complete this was. I didn't know if they maybe thought that they were only going to get one season at first, because sometimes that happens.
Yeah,
but
true.
That was, like, one of the biggest, like, things to untie the knots. And it just makes you really dislike her.
I know.
I don't know if I had more with that for the moment.
Yeah,
go
it
ahead
makes
into
you
wherever
really
you were going to go next.
dislike her. And I liked that everything fell apart after it came out that she said that. Well, she wrote that letter because, like, Pippa's now pissed at her. Wrigley and his brother Drew get in a fight, and Wrigley ends up, like, getting very injured, ends up being in the hospital.
Which I thought was a little bit much. I'm going to be honest.
He fell off a deck.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like jumping
like,
the shark a little bit.
A frat deck is not a safe place. Like, they're all in these broken down houses. He falls off, and he ends up, like, hurting his knee really bad, and he can't play for the rest of the season. And I feel like that's kind of realistic.
It didn't break the world completely for me, but it felt a little bit like a separate piece. Did you have to read that in school?
No.
Okay.
If I did, I didn't read it.
All right. I think it was summer reading before freshman year, but whatever. I don't remember that book well enough, but it reminded me of that.
What I was going to say back to this, going back to the beginning, once Wrigley finds out that Drew was involved in this whole situation, he goes to Steven, which I find so interesting. First of all, I think that Wrigley is a very in-need soul, and I strongly dislike him.
In-need soul? I just want to make sure I heard the words you said
like,
correctly there.
He's like an in-need soul.
Okay.
Like, he needs help. He's a soul in need.
Soul in need.
Yes.
Words in their orders.
He is so chaotic and so doesn't fit the rest of the characters, which I think they do on purpose. Like, he clearly needs help. He clearly is unwell. But I enjoy his, like, young, fun spirit and, like, his...
Yeah, you can understand why he's a
look on life.
magnetic
Person.
personality.
Yeah, for sure, especially on a college campus. But it's interesting to me that he goes to Steven because it shows that, like, he views Steven as someone who has their shit together. Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting.
Yeah, well, and at that point, I feel like we don't learn their history, but that's very early in the show. We're kind of assuming their relationship through what we are shown.
Right.
We don't know what evidence he has for that prior to.
Correct. But from the outsider's perspective, I think that Wrigley treats the people in his life a million times better than Steven, obviously. But on paper, I think Steven is a lot more, has his life more quote unquote put together. And I think Wrigley is striving for that. And so he looks up to Steven because of that, which I think is also very true in real life and makes me sad for Wrigley that he feels that Steven is his go-to person.
Well, what made me sad for him towards the end was, like, after he gets injured and he's like, Steven's the only one who's been looking out for you. It's like, bruv,
right?
This, from everything we've seen, it's like the con is working on people, and that is like kind of upsetting. So
upsetting. I know, very sad. My last and final note, I think I've gone through a lot of them.
I think we're missing a couple of characters there, but
I know we haven't talked about Bree enough, or really Evan,
or Charlie, if we want to go into her as, like, I don't know if she counts on your list.
Who's Charlie?
The replacement for Macy, who starts rooming with.
Oh yes, sorry. I just forgot her name. Sorry. One thing I wanted to bring up is this is kind of going back to the Stephen Lucy situation, but we know that Lucy's mom, like, is talking to that guy.
Mm-hmm. I forget his name too, but
Yeah.
Okay, go into your thoughts on that backstory, because I wanted to go into that a little bit too.
Yeah. Lucy obviously has some animosity towards her mother because, sorry, how much do you know of this part? Can you just tell me
I
about?
know that as Lucy's dad is dying, her mom is cheating on him with this other dude.
Okay.
Forget his name.
But
that's,
you know that it was like...
Yes.
Yes.
Like, as Lucy watches her dad die.
Right. Her mom is with someone else.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the second to last episode, they, like, come clean about that because Lucy can't write.
Right.
Which was another
stupid.
annoying thing for her character. That, like,
stupid.
She just isn't apparently a good, as far as we can tell, is not capable of writing anything.
I know. Besides her own trauma, apparently.
Apparently. But that's
anyway,
that's where it's
perfect.
At
Okay,
the end
good.
of the season.
That's what I wanted to know.
I don't know if we've mentioned this, but like Malia's just the seasons are a little blurred at the moment.
Yeah, because it's non-linear, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I get jumbled, but basically, Lucy can like tell Steven that this situation happened, and when Lucy's mom comes to visit her on campus, he basically comes up to the mom while the mom and Lucy are sitting on a bench talking, and he like basically refuses to talk to the mom and is like, Lucy, are you okay? Like pretending that she's like in danger with her own mother. And well, that could be the case for some people. This just basically what happened wasn't, she was never in danger. Her mother never physically or emotionally hurt her. It was just, well, I guess emotionally she did. But the way that Steven reacted to that was exactly what Lucy wanted him to do, and to like show her his loyalty to her, and mainly only her. It doesn't matter if it's her mother or her like whoever. But him doing that, I was just like, wow. Like, no respect for others, and like that just like hurt my soul for her mom, who like also I love that actress. She's in Grey's and I love her, but that is just so classic, like isolating other people, like your other loved ones from you, like to be able to manipulate you more. Like I just so sad.
I found that interesting too, because like it takes a little bit for that backstory to come out. We see from the first episode that her and her mom are kind of on the rocks. We don't really know why. There's nothing to imply it. And then I think it's episode 5 when she goes home for break. I made a note in that episode. I was like, we got to learn this backstory by the end of the episode, and we do.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I was like, okay, I can kind of see that. Although there's the phone call between her and Steven where he's like, yeah, my mom's the worst, and she's like, I bet she can't be worse than mine. And I was like, nah, man, like his mom's definitely worse.
His mom is
like several times worse. But
his mom is, how much have they shown?
A couple things. I don't know exactly where it leaves off, but like clearly things are not great, and I think her dad should have custody for what we see, but maybe there's more that we're missing right now. Anyway, after we hear the backstory of like how she watched her dad die as her mom was like
actively hooking up with his best friend.
I was like, okay, that is, I can understand.
That would mess with you.
And I can understand why it's taking her a while to forgive her mom for that.
Yeah.
So there was empathy that came up there. And then after that scene where they talk about it, I still think it's kind of like her deciding to put that in writing for her class. First of all, write your own fucking story.
Right.
There were writer frustrations that I had with just
I thought that whole thing was so stupid,
and just prove, like, again, it's like this is one of the very few things that we know about her, is that she has ambitions to be a travel writer, and all that we see of her writing in this show is proving that she can't actually come up with anything.
No, fully.
Maybe there's more of that to prove that she can in the book, but from what we see, she just can't write anything. She has no original ideas. But it comes out, and then like their conversation on the bench, it ends still a little bit tense, but when she's talking to Steven after, she's a little confused, and I was like, okay, good. Like there's dimension here. And I can sympathize with that, and I hate how he reacts to it and is like, you shouldn't like trust her at all. And
Right.
this is maybe the first step of them healing.
Yeah.
And I like how they show that. But something that I think is interesting across the show, and that was a really good example, is we're given reasons to empathize with every character. Steven's home life, I thought, was the biggest point of empathy with him. The whole time we were home with him, I was like, wow, yeah, that really sucks. There was no caveat there. It was just like, his mom is a lot.
Yeah.
And she takes out so much on the three of her kids. And his whole thing with, I forget his younger sister's name, but like, trying to help her out of the house, I was like, that is a scene where he is genuinely just trying to help someone out.
Right.
That is just a selfless action.
Yeah,
the only thing that we see him do that is selfless.
I agree.
But those scenes of empathy are not presented as an excuse for characters' flaws and actions, and I really like that in this show, because I feel like there's so many portrayal, like when we say that like a character is complex or whatever, you see this in like every villain backstory. You don't agree with their actions, but like you empathize with them. And I feel like that almost comes with the undertone of like excusing them. And I like that this undertone isn't there. We can empathize with these people, but it's not presented as an excuse for their actions. And that's just a nice nuance that I think is rare to see.
Yes, but I think that's why it's so realistic.
Yeah.
Because people are there's so many different sides to people, and yes, they do have their bad things, but they're also struggling with mental health, or they're also struggling with whatever, a mom at home who's incapable of taking care of herself without relying on her children or something like that. Like you always say, like, you don't know what they have going on behind closed doors. Like,
yeah.
This TV show shows that very well, but also shows like, okay, yes, they do have like XYZ excuse or like thing going on, but that's not an excuse because
and I like that it's not presented that way. That like, sorry to override you a little bit there. Something I've said on previous episodes, I think, about backstory is that I feel like backstory should only really be shown in as much as it pertains to the present. I'm going to draw that back a little bit with what this show has, because it's kind of an interesting counterpoint of empathizing with a character. Their home lives don't really come into play very much with the relationships between these 6, 7, 8 friends.
Yeah.
And I kind of almost like that better in this case, because they are not tying it together. It's not suggesting that like Steven had this terrible home life, therefore it's understandable that he acts this way. I feel like there's that is not the implication here. It's like,
they keep their home lives very separate, which I kind of like, because a lot of times on college campuses, I feel like you can feel like, oh, this is like my college life, and then I have my home life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just any, like, we compartmentalize.
Of course.
Between, we have our work life, school life, friend groups, even within different friend groups. We code switch around to different people.
Yeah.
And we can kind of like just separate.
I mean, this is very separated, but I mean, some people that is the case for some people. So I'm not that angry at that.
Yeah, well, and it gives them more nuance, I think. And like
agree.
you said, it's a little bit of realism. I just like it from a writing perspective, that like I feel like so often backstory for characters who are kind of presented as villainous or bad in some way is done with kind of this undertone of, therefore we can kind of understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And this is sort of like the separation. I think there's so much discussion that tends to happen around characters behaving badly in stories. And I feel like this almost separates itself nicely from that, because like none of the toxic actions that characters take feel like they are endorsed. Yeah. I don't know exactly where that lack of endorsement is coming from. Like what
I see that.
Yeah, but I think part of it is this backstory thing where empathy can still exist. Like, I genuinely empathize with Steven when we're shown stuff with his mom. Right. But then I'm just as angry at him when he's lying to everyone.
Right.
And I feel like it's rare for stories to strike that balance.
Yeah.
So that's a win for this show.
Yeah, because I think that's realistic.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If we're done with the other characters, Bree and Evan were my 2 favorites. We haven't talked about them yet.
Wait, Evan is my favorite character.
I mean, not to be name biased, but same.
Yeah.
Like,
He's the best.
Yeah, like I feel like the 2 of them behave a little bit more just like
more
normal, and just like they don't want there to be drama. Like I think Bree has some line in the last episode where she's just like, I know a lot's happened here. I don't quite know all of what it is, but I want us to get along. That's just
Yeah.
my ethos all the time with my friends. I like that it gave us them because it was just like, okay,
They're very refreshing.
nice people exist.
Yes. So refreshing.
Episode, I think it's 7 when they go to Evan's beach house.
Yes.
And that was kind of cathartic for me because I was just like, thank God somebody else in the show sees this. Like,
Right.
both of them are like, yeah, our friends kind of suck. The King's Cup game, I was so upset at I was like, fuck the rest of you. These two need a new friend group. They need to just go off and meet some new people.
I know. That made me so sad for them.
But I am glad that they, like, I was afraid that would, like, prevent them from getting together because I did ship them, like, throughout the past couple episodes, and they do. And they're just, like, I feel like they do a nice job presenting, like, when it's a little bit more from the two of their POV. They're trying to, like, diffuse. They don't want to, like, start anything up.
Right.
But there are a couple cases where, like, especially later in the show, where both of them kind of stand their ground. I think it's both against Steven. Evan tells him, like, hey, I'm going to live by myself next year. I think that's just better.
Yeah.
And Steven kind of goes at him. And he's like, all right.
I'm still going to do
cool.
this. Yeah.
Like, see ya.
Right.
And I think Bree kind of does a similar thing, maybe in the same episode. She's just like, I know what you do with the camera. Like, low key, fuck you, man.
Yeah.
Like, I see what you're doing here.
Right.
You're not fooling everyone.
Right.
And that was just very cathartic.
Yeah.
To have the two of them there. It almost feels antithetical, and I don't even want them to be in the rest of the show just so that, like, they can go meet other people. So obviously they will be, I guess, because they're all still friends at their wedding.
Right.
And I'm really upset that they made Evan hook up with Lucy at the end because that's just there's gonna have to be fallout from that, and I'm not looking forward to it.
I know. It just makes me so sad for Evan because he's the best, and it just makes me so sad for him because Lucy knew that he liked her.
But also, why? Like, I didn't even buy that when he said it. It's like, fine, conventionally attractive person, sure. But she has no personality, and I feel like he connects with... I feel like they show that he connects with people deeper than that.
Right. I agree.
Which apparently most people in the show don't. Not to discredit everyone. When that initially happened, my note was like, okay, I guess that was a one and done. Like, he mentions it once, never comes up again until the end. And I was like, oh, fuck, I guess they had to pay it off.
Right.
So, writing perspective, it's a win. But fan perspective, if I can call myself a fan, which I don't know if I want to.
I think you are.
I'm here. And I was like, you had to ruin my boy.
I know.
What did you have on both of them? I just thought they were a breath of fresh air.
I also thought that they were
like they're just the Phoebe of this show to compare to Friends.
They are just normal, and I like that they call Steven on his shit. And the whole thing with at the pool house, them playing that drinking game, and basically their friends are like try to force them to like make out in front of everyone. And
the other questions to the other characters were, I was just like, fuck these people.
We're just like yeah. I don't know. It makes me sad for them because like I think in that moment they realized that like we don't have true friends that are going to stand by us. But I think that did push them closer together. I think that is one of the reasons why they started dating, is because like they saw each other in that moment and they like shared that bonding, and it pushed them closer together. So I liked that, but their friends are just like, oh my gosh, terrible. I also didn't like that Evan and Lucy hooking up. Yeah, Lucy is like
distraught, and apparently they were both very like the line leading into it is like, I'm gonna get super drunk right now. So apparently they must afterward, was sort of implied.
Right. And I just, anytime that two people get together, there's always two people. And Evan knows who she is, and he chooses to do that as well. He doesn't do anything to stop it. And I mean, so does Lucy, but I wanted better for Evan. Yeah,
it's hard to comment on it because it's all implied. We don't see like we're given no insight into like the show's basically over at that point.
Right.
I assume they're going to go into it a bit in season 2, but I just wish it hadn't happened. I feel like it doesn't have to. Maybe it'll pay off somehow. Apparently, him and Bree end up okay. I'm still kind of bracing myself for it because they were like the one bright spot of the show for me.
They are definitely a bright spot, and I like that they have them in there because I think that they're grounding for a lot of the characters.
Mm-hmm. I think it's almost an audience surrogate thing of just like, what's going on with these people?
Yeah.
Like, it almost, like, because I think without them,
right.
it would trick you into thinking, like,
this is their reality.
Does the writer think this is normal? Right. Apparently, no. They like the show is almost showing self-awareness.
Right. I
at
agree.
a few points like that.
Yeah.
So my topic with this is writing a story around relationships. This show, I saw the book today is categorized under mystery, which I guess is fair because we do have a bit of a mystery at the center of this. But really, this show has no other hook than relationships between characters. And I wanted to look at just what keeps us invested throughout. I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of narrative momentum just comes from tying a lot of knots and then unraveling them as we go. And we still have a little bit of momentum there because there's a couple of things that haven't, like, I thought for sure by the end of this season we would have everyone know that, like, Steven essentially is responsible for Macy's death. I thought that would all be revealed by the end. It is not. Some people still don't know.
Yeah.
I think it also helps that there's a few different relationships to invest us in.
Agreed.
If this was just Steven and Lucy, I'd have tapped out probably.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to handle. Like, having the other two couples as people that we can get into, and you have the couple of, like, peripheral characters like Max and Charlie as just like these seem like nice people.
Yeah.
I think there's also a nice balance that gets struck with this. The show doesn't get too complicated. Like, I felt like it was pretty easy to keep track of everything, but there's still a lot of knots that are being tied.
I agree.
I have more points, but I want to throw it to you. Like, what do you think? And I know you are not, you don't have a writing background.
Right.
But just what do you think keeps you hooked into this?
I would say that this is like the beginning of what seems like a soap opera. It's much faster pace, obviously, because, and the only other soap opera I've seen parts of, most of, is Grey's Anatomy.
Okay. And I would say that is much more of a traditionally defined. So I would not have called this a soap opera because it's a little too. There's just, like, production.
The world isn't as big, yeah.
There's also just production things that make it more intentional,
right?
Higher budgets, production schedules, things like that.
But I would say because it's non-linear, it keeps me hooked because they keep flashing forward to Bree and Evan's wedding when some more things keep getting revealed. In the first episode, they say, like, Wrigley basically is, like, coked out at the
coked out gorilla, I believe, is the line that is used
at the rehearsal dinner. Someone says, I think Evan says to someone, like, be nice to him, like, it was his brother's anniversary.
Oh,
you didn't catch that?
I'm remembering it now.
Okay.
I had forgotten that.
So that I have, like, weird things. Some, like, that one thing stuck in my head, and I was like, this was episode 1, season 1. I was like, Drew's gonna die or whatever. Like, Drew's gonna, like.
I mean, they seem to be telegraphing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just like, immediately, I was like, Drew is gonna commit suicide, basically.
It seems to be the suggestion.
So I think, like, that hooks me too, where they drop a lot of Easter eggs. There's other ones that we brought up in this in our conversation earlier. Evan liking Lucy.
Mm-hmm. There's engagement between, like, two sets of characters are engaged. So that's, and I think there's an implication, like, it seems like Wrigley and Pippa are not together. Like, I think it's shown that, like, this is the first time they've seen each other in a minute.
Right.
In that rehearsal dinner. So I almost wonder if it's revealing too much. It's kind of an interesting narrative device of, like, just telling us, 1, these characters are still talking to each other on some level.
Right.
2, a lot of shit's happened.
Yeah.
And it's mostly just suggested, but also, like, we get pretty clear signals that Drew is dead. That feels like just a large thing to announce, even implicitly.
Especially, like, the first few minutes of episode 1, season 1.
Yeah, and at that point, we don't know who he was. Like, I think there's a reason I forgot that. But if you bothered to rewatch the show, like, how do you not
see that,
clock that?
Right.
And maybe that's a little bit of a thing because the book, I think, it doesn't seem like there's a sequel. Everything happens in this 300-page book.
I think so.
And I think the implication with that is typically you don't expect somebody to reread a book after getting halfway through it.
Right.
You expect them to finish it before rereading it. So in that sense, we're kind of jumping the gun with that. TV shows come out in seasons. We are getting a chunk of this story. I wonder if it's telegraphing more than it should to us. But a lot of things work despite that.
Yeah.
Like, as much as it's showing us out the gate, I mentioned earlier, I was surprised at how overtly gross Steven is out the gate. It's like, it's not even trying to trick us. It's not trying to trick the characters. It's just telling us, this is a bad dude from up front. We're going to see him be bad for however many seasons this runs.
Right.
And same with Lucy. Like, she's a bit of just a vacuous, like, no personality character.
Yeah.
We're going to see her also be kind of terrible to people, apparently, because that's all that she's done so far.
Right.
And, like, I'm kind of surprised that there isn't as much of a narrative hook here as there is. I don't know if you had more of an answer you wanted to give there. Why are we invested when it seems like we almost have the ending spoiled for us?
See, but I don't think that we do. I think it gives, like, enough, like, just enough to be like, what happened here? Like, I want to know how Drew died. Don't you?
I mean, I've only been thinking about it in that context for about 90 seconds.
No, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, don't you, what's another, like, loose end?
Well, I guess at this point, like, just for where season 1 ends, we're probably going to have to see more, like some kind of
fallout.
Yeah, fallout between Bree and Evan, and apparently that gets resolved somehow.
Right.
From where we are at, that is what we're shown. We are shown that Wrigley and Pippa are no longer together, so that's got to end.
Right.
And ultimately, Steven and Lucy are not together
because they're
he's with Lydia. She's with who fucking knows.
That's the major. She's with. Oh, you don't know who he is?
I forget who that is. Is it Max?
It's Max.
Okay.
Yeah, she's with Max.
Okay, I was wondering. I was like, he seems nice when he. So
you have to find out how Max gets with Lucy. Lydia and Steven
haven't even met at this point.
Haven't even met. And when she goes home, has she gone home and gone to?
Probably not.
I think during Thanksgiving, she's out on Thanksgiving Eve.
Yeah. When she clocks some other dude in the face.
Yes.
Yeah.
Her and Lydia are sitting there talking about Steven, and Lydia's like, Steven sucks. So how does she get from Steven sucks to engage to him? That is my biggest, like, how do we get there? Like, I think I'm still very hooked, but I also do like watching, like I said, long form TV where I'm like invested in the characters for a long time. So like, this is the kind of content that I enjoy. So maybe that's why I'm so hooked.
I'm more hooked when I'm in it. I said that it took me a couple minutes to like have this show hit its stride for me.
Yeah.
It took basically the first 3 episodes for that to happen.
But okay, that's like not that bad. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, you have to get through the first 2 seasons and then it's great."
Yeah,
the first 2 episodes, that's not that bad.
But I wouldn't have done it if you didn't tell me to watch. I mean, I wouldn't have watched this in the first place. But like after episode, I think I watched the first 2 episodes the first night that I started, and I was like, this might be rough.
Yeah.
And then the next night I did, or whenever I picked it up next, I did 3 and 4. I was like, okay, I could maybe do this. Like once it gets its momentum going, like right now, I'm not really anticipating season 2, but maybe like once things pick back up.
Season 2 is juicy. Like,
is Susan a character, or did you just say season?
I just misspoke.
Okay.
But season 2 is so much, like, I'll have double the amount of notes.
Okay.
I think it's way juicier. It's shorter, though. It's only 8 episodes.
I guess we'll see. I kind of don't have a ton hooking me in right now with it. But I was, like I said, I was relatively hooked in for most of the season.
Good.
There's kind of 2 rules that I think come into play with a story like this. One is for individual characters and one is for relationships. For individual characters, this is almost just like a human nature thing that comes out in stories. When we see a character by themselves, we have to be seeing them as their true self. They cannot have a facade. They can't know that we as the audience exist. So, and I don't think this show breaks that rule yet. But it is playing with that. Like, that's just an implicit thing. We aren't even really thinking about it when we are observing characters. It's just, we all know that, like, when we're around people, sometimes we are, like, completely vulnerable, but there's always a chance when we are seeing people interact with someone else that it is, on some level, a facade.
Yeah.
When they are with themselves, that facade has to be gone. This often comes up with, like, you see it break on occasion with, like, villainous characters. If somebody is acting like the good guy when only the audience is watching them, that's a problem, because people don't do that. If they're a villain, they need to be acting like a villain if they know that nobody else is around to see them.
Right.
That's just a thing that I think this show is playing with a little.
I think it's playing with that because Lucy and Steven are such manipulators.
But they can't... Here's the thing. If they are... So they can do that with other characters. Lucy and Steven are not allowed to lie to us. That's just breaking narrative rules.
Yeah,
and so far, I don't think they are. But it does create, like... There's a couple moments that I think are interesting on that level. Like, again, comparing to Gone Girl, like... I don't want to say too much to not spoil it. But there's a character in that story that is very... Essentially just cold and unfeeling, almost to the core.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that was the type of character we have here, but there are the couple of moments that we have Steven acting by himself. He does seem like he gets him, like, when he goes back to the accident, or the scene of the accident, he seems truly guilty in that moment, or at least, like, regretful.
Yeah.
On some level.
Yeah.
And same with, like, when he's at home with his mom, there's a couple of times where he's just by himself and he's like, oh, God. Like, that is not a facade.
Yeah.
So we need, like, that... You got to stay true to that. Hopefully they continue to. The other thing, and this is more of something that... The first thing, it was something I've heard other people say. This is kind of something that I've come up with as just a barometer for stories like this. A challenge that I find comes up with relationships in stories is that you want there to be enough conflict that you have a story, but the conflict can't be so big that it ruins the relationship if you want it to keep going.
Yeah.
Now, to a certain extent, this show is crossing that line from the jump in some cases. For the couples that are a little more normal coded for this,
Evan
like...
and Bree.
Yeah, or even just the more platonic relationships across this show. At a certain point, you want to have narrative momentum. You want to have conflict between these people. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you need us to believe that these characters would still even want to be around each other. And that can be a difficult balance to find in some cases, especially with, like, people who are in a positive relationship. If it's antagonistic and they just both want a MacGuffin, that's easy.
Right.
But when it's a thing where, like, we want to make this relationship work, but there's challenges, you gotta wisely scale those challenges. That's part of why I'm a little bit bracing myself for season 2, is, like, I feel like bridges should have been burned by this point in a couple cases, and it's going to be hard to keep me hooked in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. We'll see.
Okay. I see what you're saying, and I feel like they're really towing that line with Steven and Lucy, obviously. But
I'm kind of okay with it with them because I feel like they've crossed it to egregiously at this point. That it's just kind of in the language of this show that, yes, these people are going to be awful.
Right. And I think people are like, what crazy shit are they going to pull off next? I think that's their hook, and that's why they're able to get away with that with their relationship.
I agree with that. Yeah. But I think there may be problems that come up with that with other characters. The one that I'm thinking of most is Evan seems like he's done with these people, especially with Steven.
Yeah.
How are we going to get scenes where they are in the same room together in the later season? It seems like that is close to burned down at this point. At the very least, like, he just wants out. Maybe it's not the hardest break ever, but he wants out.
Yeah.
So how do we keep them around? Maybe we introduce other characters. Don't tell me. I think introducing other characters could be helpful. There might be, like, plot conveniences to bring it back. I'm worried that they're not gonna pull it off, because this felt like a nice closed end to this season. for the most part. Clearly there's, several chapters of book left to go through. So
Yeah.
I guess there's a plan. And we've got another 7 years before we catch up to the present. So there's a lot of room to keep going.
And there's also a season 3 happening as well.
I assume so. Yeah.
I didn't feel that this ending was tied up at all. Mainly because I started watching this in 2024 when there was already a season 2 about to come out.
Season 2 is quite recent, I saw. It only aired maybe a month.
I watched
it
live. I watched it as it dropped. I feel like that season also didn't end tied up as well. So we might have different perspectives on that. I feel like I'm excited for our next episode covering season 2.
Yeah. I guess we'll see. I'm a little apprehensive about going into the show as it continues, but we'll see. I glanced at some IMDb ratings for each episode, and season 2 seems like on the whole it is rated higher.
Yeah.
That might just be retention from people who stuck around.
It's way better.
Okay. Better for you might not be better for me. We might be diverging a bit at this point.
I know.
So I got to the end of my notes here if you wanted to say anything
I'm
else.
done as well. Thank you for watching this. I know this is different content for you.
It is. But thank you for making me do it, because it's good to branch. I'm always open to branching out to stuff. And this is interesting on some level. This wasn't really a topic, but I'm glad that stuff like this exists. I don't think this is full-on trash TV at all.
Good.
It certainly has elements of it, but I don't think it is. I don't tend to gravitate towards stuff that is... I feel like this is purely relationship-based. I don't feel like there's really a theme exactly at the core of this yet. Maybe that...
toxic relationships.
Yeah, there might be a more cohesive theme that emerges as it goes. I think that can happen sometimes in TV shows. They don't necessarily... we just might not be able to tell from an audience perspective yet because the story's not done.
Yeah.
But I tend to not gravitate towards stuff that is purely drama for the sake of it. It's why I don't watch reality TV.
Right.
But I gained an appreciation for there's a place for that. It can be... you find yourself just thinking about how do I relate to people? How do these characters' actions mirror what I do? And that can be a valuable thing that stories can do.
Yeah.
I appreciate being more exposed to that than I normally am with this.
Yeah.
And maybe season 2 will surprise me, and maybe we'll get more of it, and it'll be better than I am fearing.
I hope that you're happily surprised with season 2, mainly because you already committed to me that you would watch it.
I did. Season, aside from the first 2 episodes, season 1 was not painful.
Okay.
First 2 episodes were, like I said, pretty clunky because Lucy is just so hard to get on board.
She really is.
The first 2 episodes are just her and Steven being terrible
I know.
at each other. Well, him being terrible and her just being a blank slate, nothing character, and then we get a little bit more. I still don't know if it's a writing problem or if it's just she is written to be the most boring person of all time.
I know, and I'd love to see, I've never seen any of these characters besides Lucy's mom in anything
Oh, you mean
else.
the actors?
Yeah.
I don't think the actors are doing a bad job. I don't want any shade that I've thrown at the character to reflect on Lucy Van Patten as an actor.
No, but I've never seen her.
Else.
I haven't seen her in anything else, and I would be interested too because I'm I wonder how she played this character her and Steven basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so interesting to me that they're dating. I'm eating up their TikToks. I can't
Okay. I didn't know that until you mentioned
basically,
it earlier today,
they just keep making these TikToks that is I guess Steven isn't like that. And I have this problem where I'm once you're a character in my head, you are that character. Which I think a lot of people can relate to, but...
Especially when it's this strong of a character.
Yeah,
this big of a person.
Right, Iron Man is Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
Captain America is Captain America. Those people are just...
Chris Evans to me is Lucas Lee and his dude from Not Another Teen Movie. But...
No, but he is so Steven in my head, and I wonder... Because I'm sure that this will probably launch their careers, I think.
It could, yeah.
I think it's... in my circle, it's pretty big.
I hadn't heard of it, but I think Jackson Wade to me is more impressive so far, but he also has just so much more to work with.
Yeah, he does.
To Lucy to Grace Van Patten's defense.
You keep calling her Lucy.
Also, Jackson White's eye acting in this was
crazy.
His eyes are as good as Jack Black's eyebrows. they're good at playing annoying people. Like,
I know.
when I think it's in the, I don't know which episode it is, but when they're like saying "I love you" to each other and the tone that they're doing it, and I'm just like, I hate you guys so much.
I know.
And they're playing it to do that.
They
Just
are.
like they're playing it like the worst couple you know.
Right.
They're just like, oh, these people. Like, why am I around these? Oh,
I know.
there they are again. There they go.
But see, they keep me hooked. They keep me hooked.
And it's good performances. I just like they're so annoying.
No, they are so annoying.
The way they speak is so annoying.
It really is.
But it's a good performance. Like it credit to the actors on that because it's solid.
No, definitely.
And credit to the rest of it. I don't think there's a bad performance so far on this show, but like the rest of them have a little bit less to chew on. Maybe we'll see more of them.
We definitely will.
And we definitely will because there's a season 2. So if we're done, we can go to the boilerplates. So Tell Me Lies season 2 will be an upcoming episode. Probably within a month, we're going to be back.
Christmas.
Yeah, for Christmas. So we'll probably record it around then. In between that, in some capacity, we have Interstellar and Sunshine. So parts 2 and 3 of our sci-fi run. We also have an episode on trailers with another guest that I'm really excited about. I've been prepping for this trailers episode for so long. For other stuff, we have our YouTube channel, our Patreon, and our Discord. You can join the Patreon for $1 a month. The Discord's free. The YouTube's free. I hate saying this, but like, share, subscribe. Apparently I should say that.
Yes.
Really, it sounds so cringy. You can also follow the show on Instagram. We have, our handle is INT Analysis Pod. We are also on, this is new as of this episode, we are on Blue Sky, which is like the new, slightly better Twitter. Same handle at INT Analysis Pod. I'm also on there and Instagram and Letterboxd at ev_Wes. I think it's a dash instead on Blue Sky. The other two, it's underscored.
This will all be in the description below.
It will be. Do you want to plug any of your handles? There's no pressure to.
I just have Instagram.
Okay.
At Malia Wes.
And yeah, that's where we're at. Thank you for joining.
Yes.
And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll see you next time for whichever episode you tune into next, whether it's Tell Me Lies season 2 or I'm going to plug a little more just because I assume we have a lot of people here who are here for you and are not normal fans of the show. I don't know how many, we'll see. We have other stuff here. This is not the type of thing we normally cover, but we have a lot of episodes.
Correct.
If you enjoyed this conversation, we tend to be a little more analytical and less just like, what the hell is happening with these characters, like we were today.
Sorry.
It's fine. Like, it's good to dip into new territory like that. But, yeah, look through if you enjoyed this, and we'll be back with more. So, thank you.
Thank you.